You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
I want people to feel confident because people ride better when they feel confident. So I'm not the coach that you go to with your kid to see how big they're going to jump. That is not my style. I really like to build people up a little bit so that they feel like, they understand what they're doing. Their horses understand. Maybe that's what I say what my teaching style would be. I really make sure people understand, or I try to at least, what their horses are thinking in the moment. Like, how is your horse going to be better in this situation? And start to kind of make that more of a priority. And I'm very into the horse's understanding. When the horse understands, the horse will be more successful. When the horse is more successful, the rider will do less.
Welcome to the Practical Horseman podcast, featuring conversations with respected riders, industry leaders, and horse care experts. The show is co-hosted by Practical Horseman editors, and our goal is to inform, educate, and inspire. I'm Julia Boughtonhouse, and this week's episode is with international eventer Megan Kepferle. Though she was not born into a family of equestrians, Meg has always been drawn to horses. After years trying to convince her family to let her start riding, she finally began lessons at a nearby stable. Within a few years, she found her way into the barn's instructor program, progressed from pony hunters to equitation to jumpers, and then learned about eventing. She took her horse to their first schooling event, won, and never looked back. A decade later, Meg found herself in central New Jersey working for an up-and-coming event rider in the area. That job launched her into professional grooming, which led her to work for Sinead Halpin for 5 years. In 2012, Meg became the chef de keep for the Area 2 Young Rider eventing team and championed 3 consecutive medal-winning teams. Coming from the backyards of horse riding schools, Meg understood the need for easily accessible quality education from high-performance athletes for kids and amateurs of all abilities, not only for those seeking the top ranks of eventing, but also those simply wishing to learn how to produce confident, safe, and enjoyable partnerships with their horses. This inspired Meg to start her business, Kepferle Equestrian, which offers programs to riders of all ages, abilities, and financial backgrounds. And, in order to be the best role model and trainer she can be, Meg set fierce goals of her own. Climbing up the ranks of eventing, she has reached the 4-star level with her off-the-track thoroughbred gelding, Anakin, and now has a goal of competing in the 5-star at the Kentucky 3-day event in 2024. The road with Anakin has not always been a smooth one, though, as he was diagnosed with kissing spines. For the first year and a half after purchasing Anakin, Meg worked to properly treat and maintain the disorder. She built his training and conditioning program around stretching and core strengthening, building muscle over his top line and abdomen. Through Meg's hard work and dedication and the support of her veterinary team, Anakin is comfortable, successful, and has continued to compete. In this episode, Meg dives into her journey with Anakin and explains the program she's developed to keep him happy, healthy, and competitive. She also speaks about her training philosophy for both horses and students and gets candid about the financial aspect of the sport. Before we dive into the podcast with Meg, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this week's episode, Boehringer Ingelheim, and share their message. Veterinarians, farriers, trainers, riders, grooms. Everyone plays a role keeping horses at peak performance. Boehringer Ingelheim is proud to provide the tools to help your team keep them healthy. Learn more at boehringer-ingelheim.com. Now, enjoy the episode with Meg.
Okay, so I have Megan Kepferle here. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course.
So I always like to start off by just getting a little bit of background. And my first question is, how did you get interested in horses and riding to begin with?
So it's a little unclear, but I think when I was really little, I was always kind of gravitating towards, My Little Ponies. And there's this picture my mom has of me when I was really little. We went and visited an Amish farm. There's a lot of Amish around where I grew up, and I was petting the horse, and I don't know. I just remembered this. I don't have any real memory of that instance, but it's always been kind of the thing that my mom says this is when it started. But I think it was because my best friend growing up, her mom rode and her aunt rode. And so that was my first kind of exposure to actually getting on a horse. And, it was a little magical because it was so out of the realm of anything my family was involved in. And so I always
Right.
had this kind of draw to the unknown. So I don't really know exactly, but that was probably how I got started into wanting to ride, was my best friend.
It was in your blood a little bit with you said it was your
Totally.
aunt.
Yeah, it my mom, the only horses in my family, my mom grew up on a farm in Washington State, and they had like farm horse, like work horses basically.
Right.
And so yeah, it was kind of obscure how I just kind of became, as a little kid, obsessed with horses.
Yeah.
But it ever since I can remember, my whole room was horse, everything horse. So
It's amazing how that happens. We're just drawn to them. It's like we're born with it.
it's true. It's really true. And it's, interesting now. I'm kind of at the age where all of my friends have kids, and my fiance has kids, and kids are so hot or cold with horses. It's kind of interesting. So
Yeah.
like my fiance's kids they don't really care about the horses at all.
Right. Didn't have the bug for it, just couldn't really be bothered with it. But me and my sister, we couldn't stay away from him, so I totally get it.
Yep.
So what is it about horses and the sport that has kept you involved for so long?
I think, my background is what has kept me. So I think it's so ingrained in my, core DNA that I had to work really hard for it since I was a little kid. It was never something that was just given to me. And I was always kind of in a situation that it was far easier for me not to ride than ride, and I wasn't very good at it. and all of my friends at the barn grew up in horsey families, and they'd been riding since they were little kids, and they all had horses, and they owned their horses, and I always felt like I was trying to catch up. So I think that just little competitiveness in me has kept me trying, my whole life. And whereas, interesting enough, most of my friends that I grew up riding with don't ride anymore. And I'm kind of the only one. I'm the only professional out of all of us. And I was the last one to get a horse. So it's just kind of funny how I think it's just the competitive nature of me, maybe, and the situation that I was in, kind of always feeling like I was not good enough. And it kept me,
Kept you motivated.
Yeah, motivated. That's the word. Motivated to keep trying,
I think that almost all of us as riders, we have that competitive nature in us that keeps us motivated. Outside of just the love of horses, I think it's kind of something innate to us.
Yes, I agree. And it shows up a little differently for everybody, what that competitiveness is. But I do agree. Otherwise, I think we'd quit.
Yes, it's a very, very demanding sport and career.
Yeah, totally.
Actually, I read that when you were growing up, you used to watch VHS tapes of Karen and David O'Connor.
Oh yeah, that's how I kind of got it into eventing, because eventing wasn't really a thing where I grew up, and it is now, which is awesome. But I started riding in the 90s, like the mid 90s, and I grew up at a lesson barn, a great lesson program, but it was very humble, and we did hunter jumpers, and our big culmination, I still want to call it event, horse show, was going to Culpeper once a year. So we did a lot of local stuff, and I liked it. It was fun. Obviously, it's all I knew. But I was always drawn to riding outside of the ring, and I would fox hunt. The master lived next door to us, so, and his wife was my music teacher in elementary school, so they always let me come hunting, and I always loved being out of the arena. And so there was one lady, Joanne, that did event at the starter level, and I don't even remember what it was called back then, and she invited me to come with her once, and that's how I kind of got into it. And then once I did it one time, I was obsessed with learning more, right? So that's when I started watching, the Karen David videos, and I would watch Thrills and Spills. I don't know if you know that. You're younger than me, I think, but there's a video called Thrills and Spills that was a video compilation of like big 5-star events, and people, just little clips of people doing awesome, and then people like biting it.
Right.
And I thought that was so amazing. Little do I know.
Was that like a YouTube thing? Oh no, I guess
no, YouTube
if that was
didn't
in the 90s, YouTube.
Yeah, no, there was no internet. This was pre-YouTube, pre-phones, pre-anything. So
I'm dating myself.
Yes, it's hilarious. I'm dating myself, I think, is the real thing. But yeah, so it again was kind of like this alluring, cool thing that I didn't really know much about, but wanted to learn as much as I could about. And we had kind of like a hierarchical system in the barn, and you worked your way up the ladder, and you became junior riding instructors and then senior riding instructors. And he had a really good program set up for us, and it taught us a lot of things. I could spend a whole hour talking about what that program gave me as a professional now, but what it did was it gave me a platform to get other people interested in the sport. So I, reading books and watching videotapes, created an eventing curriculum for
That's amazing.
these little kids, and we introduced it in camp. And we're doing like little tiny things, but I kind of got started that way, just completely grassroots, and big grassroots and big dreams with a big gap in the middle. Yeah. So that's kind of how I started eventing. Oh man.
And actually, speaking of mentors, I could say, or you could say, maybe Karen and David are mentors for you in one way. So I wanted to ask, including them, who are some of the mentors that have been in your career throughout your life?
Yeah. So I mean, Karen and David, at that point they still are celebrities, but like at that point, they were, such a force. And so I would say they're mentors for the growth of the sport, I think. Definitely, at least from my perspective. They learned how to market, and that was huge at that time. Now everyone markets themselves, but at that time, it's, especially before the internet, like there's no way to really know what anyone else was doing unless you read a newspaper or magazine. And to be in a newspaper magazine, you got to be winning. So that kind of, was more of a global scale for me. And again, as like a little kid, I looked up to, the people that I met at the Washington International Horse Show. Margie Goldstein Ingle was my idol in the 90s. And she's still amazing. I met her probably the first year I ever rode, and I had her poster on my wall, and I wanted to be her, even though I'm like twice her size. But she, I thought I was going to be a show jumper. That's what I thought I was going to be. And once I actually started eventing, even still, like in school, I felt so far removed from the sport. I was really, I don't know how to explain it. I was really kind of just like out there, like trying my best. I didn't, I was throwing stuff against the wall to see what would stick, and somehow found myself in England after college and working for Helen Bell, who evented at the top level in the 90s. Interesting enough, was in one of those Thrills and Spills videos. And she kind of got me a little perspective. I was at a place that she did not compete at that level anymore. But she had a sales program, and so I didn't have a lot of skills as far as finesse goes, but I knew how to stay on. And
Right.
that's important when you're riding young horses. And so I had a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had in the United States there. And she kind of exposed me to the British side of eventing. And that's when I kind of really put myself into perspective of where I was and where the best riders were and what they were doing and kind of what the sport really was. So at that point, William Fox Pitt was at the just beginning, like the meat of his career, and I got to meet him, and so he was definitely someone to idolize, it and still is, obviously. But at that time, I'm rubbing shoulders with all these riders that are like, going to the Olympics, and the American riders are idolizing. And so I really wanted to live in England. Like, I really wanted to stay there. But I couldn't because of visas and money and, life. And so, now my idols are, my friends. When I was finally doing this grooming, working for Sinead, I still look up to Sinead and her approach to this sport and the approach to training. I use it as kind of my beacon all the time. Andrew Nicholson is still probably the only rider I still have what's the word, that I'm still starstruck around. You kind of meet all your idols eventually at this sport. They start to become your coaches, and but he is still, I still get nervous around him. But I think the US has produced, my friends that were coming up with Sinead are now, the top of the sport, and they are just, amazing riders. And it's so cool to be able to be their friend and, still feel like they have so much to teach me and everybody else. I ride with Will Coleman a bit in the wintertime. I love the way he rides and takes care of his horses, and his wife Katie is one of my good friends, and their program is amazing, and I idolize that program. I try to aspire to that program, even though the caliber of horse they have is like bar to none. And obviously Boyd is amazing, and I've gotten to ride with him a bunch, and he's got a very relaxed approach to teaching, which really is good for me for cross country, because I get so wound up. So he's helped me a lot. Whereas Coleman is a little bit more methodical in his teaching and keeps me a little bit more accountable. And then Tammy, I can't really answer this question. I don't think many people could answer this question right now without bringing up Tammy. I was thinking about this actually a few minutes ago, and I was going to say she kind of, a few years ago came out of nowhere, but it's been like 10 years. Time flies. But Tammy has just noticeably been working really hard and grinding and getting better and better and better every year. And she is, not 25 years old, and she has made an amazing business on the West Coast, and she's really proud of it, which I think is awesome. And she is such an inspiration to, I think, everybody. I think she's an inspiration to her friends. And I think she's an inspiration to younger riders, and kids just starting out, women. She's just, for me personally, I resonate with her a bit because I am a little bit older, starting off at the top levels, and it makes it feel like it's still achievable. She's I think 10 years older than me. So 10 years ago, she was a little bit more, doing a little bit more than me, I think. But, it makes it feel possible. And she's also hilarious. She's really easy to get along with. She's really the first person that will laugh at a mistake that she's made. She's really approachable, and she just keeps inspiration, just at reach. And it really, especially this year, obviously everyone knows Tammy now because she won Kentucky, but she deserved that win. That was like who I was rooting for from the beginning, and she deserved it, and nobody else really deserved it more this year than she did. So I'm really excited for her and what's coming. But she definitely, she makes the hard days a little bit easier right now. Like, if Tammy can do it, I can do it.
She really is an inspiration, and she's I actually spoke with her for this podcast right after she won Kentucky, and she, like you said, she's just such a positive light. She is a wonderful person, and it's really great to have a woman in the sport like her that younger riders can look up to and think to themselves that they can do it.
100%. And she's genuine, and it's not that
Totally.
not everyone's genuine, but she's very very much herself. Like, she knows who she is, and she's proud of who she is, and she admits her faults and works on them publicly and tirelessly, and it's really just nice to see, and nice to see that it's paying off for her. So
a few minutes ago you mentioned British eventing when you were over in England. And so do you find that there's a big difference between British eventing and American eventing?
That's a good question. Do I find it? Yes and no. I mean, I think yes, in the logistical sense of the sport. I think the upbringing in England, at least what I saw, like the kids that would come for lessons and stuff, the caliber of riding is a little bit different. It just the priorities that they have as young riders are different than the priorities that I was brought up on. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but they are taught to be brave very young. And then the technical parts and the theory and all of that comes a little bit later. Whereas I feel like in America, the program's bringing up young riders, and I'm talking not like young riders going to young riders, but like kids learning how to ride.
Yeah.
Most of us start in hunters, right? Like it's
yeah.
And it's a little bit more hand holding. The horses are a little bit more trained or old. You don't see a lot of little kids eventing.
Right.
It is a little different that way.
Okay.
At the top of the level, I mean, I think everyone would agree with me when I say that, America has gotten so much better. The caliber at the top is, it's not the same for people, on every team. So that's awesome. I just think we've worked really hard, and now I think we're able to stand against a lot of them. But, I think it's it's a little different there. It's a little easier, I think, logistically, maybe financially. I don't know. I think it's easier to keep horses there. It makes it hard. I think the financial aspect in the United States really hurts us.
Right. Yeah.
I think it is a little different that way. And I also think the sport is a little bit more mainstream there, as a culture.
Yeah.
And here it's not, not at all, So it's a little different for sure.
And I want to get into your horses next. So you have Anakin,
Yes.
who you've had for quite some time.
Yes.
And you had an article with us with Practical Horseman a few years ago about him because he was diagnosed with kissing spines, but through, you guys really worked through that and you were able to still have a lot of competitive success with him. So I was wondering what your experience with that is and with him.
Yeah. So he, has significant kissing spines, and he obviously has been performing at the advanced level for, I think, 4 years now.
Yeah.
And listen, it's something to manage for sure, and it's not, one size fits all. I'm not saying that you should just, every horse with kissing spine is going to be an advanced horse, but
Mm-hmm.
the hard thing, and I do think there has been a little bit of a shift with the attitude towards kissing spine, but unfortunately not as much as I would have hoped at this point. But it's so specific and so it has everything to do with management. And,
Right.
I think as a person buying a horse, you have to be realistic of what you can manage. And I think a lot of people are moving towards kissing spine surgery. And again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. But, I've talked to the surgeon here, and not that Anakin was ever a candidate for it, more as a curiosity. We kind of were just in this kind of intellectual conversation because I've kind of become a poster child for kissing spine. And it is so dependent on how you manage it afterwards. And so I feel like kissing spine is one of those things. It's just a condition of a horse, and it's going to be at different levels for every horse, but you can always make it better. You can always make it better no matter what. Like even me right now with this horse I've managed for however long, I could probably still make it a little better. And it has everything to do with just committing to, like, this is how my horse needs to be worked. I need to make sure I have this kind of conversation with my vet. I need to be on top of, of my saddle fit. I need to, just be more aware of what is happening. I mean, I just feel like it's 100% manageable in most cases. And, not every horse with kissing spine can do the job that Anakin does, but I actually argue that horses with kissing spine need a job more than horses without it, because their back needs to be strong.
Interesting.
The worst thing I do for this horse is give him time off. And I have to give him time off because his back is not his most his biggest problem. His feet are shitty thoroughbred feet and they need rest. And so I've had to learn the hard way, like, if he needs a month off after a season to, like most event horses get a break, he needs to stay walking or aqua treading or whatever to not lose his top line. And otherwise it takes so long to get him back going after a break. And
Right.
now I've had him, God, 6 or 7 years. And so I've kind of, made all of the mistakes and learned exactly what I need to do to keep his back feeling good. And honestly, his back still gets a little sore, like the very height of the season when he's working really hard. But, I'm not saying it's not, something that I manage, but I've made it a priority his whole life. And his back is great for as terrible of his x-rays are. And I've actually bought a young horse a few years ago for a lot of money that had kissing spine. And maybe I was dumb to do that. But I just feel like I can manage it, if
You're like a pro at it now.
Yeah. And then I get so mad when people discount horses because of it. But, it's, people read the x-rays and they don't read the clinical exam. And that's so important. I haven't really had that many negative experiences with horses with kissing spine. And usually, like, when somebody comes to me with a specific issue, I'm like, that sounds exactly like kissing spine. Have you ever looked at their back? And I'm not going to say I've got 100% track record, but it's, I don't know, 95% right usually. Horses that rush fences or stop at fences, or, horses that swap leads, all of these things that can be misconstrued as behavioral issues or training issues. Look at their back. Just look at their back. They might just need their back injected one time and they might be fine. Or, once every couple years.
Yeah.
In the beginning of Anakin's life, competitive life with me, I probably did it once every year and a half. And now I do it probably once a year. He's older now, he's working harder, but, and that's more just as a preventative, so I don't get into the meat of my season and wish I'd done it.
Right. Yeah.
But I think just like anything, you got to manage the horse. And I think sometimes we put the horses into a box based on our expectations and goals. And we're not really thinking about, it doesn't matter if you want to, be a trail horse or a dressage horse or an event horse or a hunter. If the horse has pain somewhere, you got to address it and fix it. You got to make it better. And the best thing for a kissing spine horse is top line, right? It's work.
Right. Yeah. What does his maintenance look like? I know you just mentioned like the injections, but beyond that.
Yeah. If you want me to go through his vet records, I can go through that. But for his back, like I said, I'll inject it usually in the spring. Like I did it before Kentucky. And it still feels pretty good. I thought he was getting a little back sore a couple weeks ago. But it wasn't his back, it was his feet. It's totally fine now. I'll shockwave him before an event, just to make sure he's feeling good. But some people do mesotherapy. I actually haven't done that one time on him yet. I use MagnaWave religiously. I have a Beamer blanket. He stands on a TheraPlate every day. Anything I can do to just relieve any type of arthritic pain he's feeling. I compare him to myself, honestly. Like I have a lot of arthritis and a lot of bad conformation, and when I take the time to prepare before I have to do something hard, I feel so much better. And that's how he feels too. He does a lot of walking before I start working. I do a lot of cantering, like out of the saddle, before I start any type of real collected work.
Right, when you're on his back.
Yeah. And if I know he's having a bad day, I don't try to hammer him through it. I have found usually jumping helps rather than hurts. So dressage for him is tough, no matter how he's feeling in his body. So that's not really a dressage saddle. Trying to make him do a bunch of collected work isn't gonna really make him feel better unless he already feels well. So usually I put him in jump tack and let him go and stretchy and forward and happy and jumping little jumps kind of round, just so he starts to kind of move his back, and that usually makes him feel the best, funny enough. So and I think probably a lot of people that have gone at upper levels with horses with kissing spine would probably agree with me. They kind of crack their back once or twice over a big oxer, and then all of a sudden they feel great. And then you can do then you can put them together and get your half passes and your flying changes easily. But he's really like a long horse. Like he's not like compact, and he's built to be not this. It's kind of amazing what he does, honestly. I take his conformation really into consideration when we're choosing what we're doing. But I kind of let him guide me a bit.
Yeah. What was it like for you when he first got the diagnosis? Like, was that a scary moment for you? And how did you move forward?
Oh, I wish I was lying when I said I cried in the woods for like 45 minutes. I think I actually called Hannah Sue Burnett because or Holberg. She's married now. that because she had a little thoroughbred and Nike that had kissing spine, and I knew that, and so I called her, like, she's the one that talked me off the ledge. And I called Jan Benny in midair, had really bad kissing spine, and I knew that. I needed to build my community quickly because I was falling from the sky.
Yeah.
My vet, who is funny enough, Jan Henriksen, he's very dry and I wouldn't say super emotional, and we actually complement each other very well because I am very very emotional. So he tried to make a joke. In the moment, I did not think it was funny. Now it's hilarious. He told me he wasn't going to let me see the x-rays unless I promised I wouldn't cry.
Oh.
So yeah, it was terrible. I was scared because I had never had to deal with it before. I mean, it was just not really something that people thought about all the time, and I knew he was probably going to have some, like, he's long in his back and he was always back sore, but he was still performing, well at a pretty high level at that time. I think he was going intermediate when I found it. So I was expecting something. I just wasn't expecting every spine or every vertebrae
the
in his
extent of
spine.
it.
Yeah. But, you deal with it, you take the blow, you ingest, and then you make a plan. And that's what we did. And, we were dealing with a blank slate at that point. So we had so many things to try. And, I felt pretty positive about it. And Jan had told me, the best advice she ever got was ride him like he doesn't have kissing spine. Like, you can't really baby them in their work because you'll never make them work, and then they'll never get stronger. And so,
Right.
that was great advice. And I still use that, not meaning that you hammer them, but like, you gotta like make them, go forward. Like, they're, at least with him, he's a little behind the leg all the time. He's very, very lazy. And I'm sure his back has a lot to do with that. But it's also his personality. So, I start every time after I first found out, I was like, is it his back? Is it his back?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, is it his back?
I bet.
So you gotta kind of push through a little bit with a strategy. It's definitely, you want to build, right? You don't want to go all the way to the top of the mountain. And I think people underestimate how long that takes to develop a back, especially in a long, weak horse. It takes years to really get them strong enough. So I had a pretty good foundation on him. He had gotten a lot stronger over the, year or two that I'd had him. So I was already in a pretty good position. But yeah, it takes time. It takes time and patience and commitment. But it's just like anything else in horses that you're dealing with. Most horses have something to manage. And honestly, like, this is one I think is very manageable. And it makes you a better rider because you can't really shortcut, like, you got to really do your homework and really build the foundation, with the horse and keep the foundation going. So it makes you better, and it makes me feel like I can now do it again and again and again, like, I feel like I feel okay taking on horses that have bad backs because I have enough tools to help them.
You have plenty of experience with it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And how is he doing now? I know you said you were at plantation last week, which was a total wash because of the hurricane.
Total
but was he
wash. So
was he up there with you?
I actually ended up having to scratch him because he came up a bit sore on Wednesday.
Okay.
Right before we left, which was a bummer. He's a little bit on borrowed time right now, not because of his back. He's always kind of been on borrowed time since the day I bought him. When I vetted him, they told me not to buy him. So, but I did anyway because I loved him, and he's been amazing. But he's got a bunch of arthritis and problems, and I take care of them the best that I can. And I'm always making him as comfortable as possible, and he still is doing the job. He just is, you got to take care of the old ones a little bit. And he's not that old in years, but his body is old. So, my plan with him, if I can, he feels great now, of course, he's totally fine. But the schedule of the season is always really tough when, you need to skip one in the middle of the meat of the season. It's kind of hard to reroute. So I've got my plan B for this season. And, if we can do it and he feels happy and he's still sound and happy, then our goal is to go to Terra Nova 4-star, in a November. And my goal is to qualify him for Kentucky next year. And if he tells me his body can't do it, then I'll retire him and give him some downtime and try to find a young rider for him next year.
Yeah.
I already told him, if he can get me to Kentucky, next season, spring season, that's going to be his last season at the level. He's been going for a while. He's been going for a while, and he's, Kentucky this year, that was the best show he's ever had. So, I know he's still happy, but sometimes I don't know what's harder to deal with, when they're still happy and doing the job and their body starts to tell you it's time, or if their brain starts to tell you it's time, but their body's still fine. It's always the hard balance, trying to figure out when the right time is to stop. But right now we're still going, and we're going to see where we can get this season. And, obviously my goal is to do a 5-star. I think he's very capable. He's got like a heart of gold, and he's a phenomenal jumper. But he only has so many gallops left in him. So, if he needs to stop, it's time, and that's fine. I've had enough time to kind of wrap my head around it. And every year, I think everyone kind of feels this way. They bring their horses out. How are they feeling? How are they feeling after these gallops? How are they feeling after these, horse shows? And when they get to be seasoned old pros, you kind of have to take it one show at a time and just wait and see how they're doing. I mean, I've never had a horse go this long at the, and this is my first advanced horse. So, he doesn't really owe me anything. He's done so much. And honestly, if he hadn't had such a great run at Kentucky, I probably would have already decided, he's done what he's needed to do. But he felt unbelievable this year.
Yeah, he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to.
Yeah, he was so
let it go
happy and so awesome. I mean, he's just such an awesome cross country horse. So, it's one day at a time with this guy at this point. And it's I couldn't be more pleased with him. We always wish we have a little bit more time, right? But he really doesn't owe me anything else. He's such a good horse.
Speak about Kentucky in the spring. Would you aim for the 5-star there?
That's the goal. I don't
okay.
need to keep running 4-stars with him. Like, he's done it. He's done 3 and done them well. And I've made mistakes, which is why I'm still trying to qualify. But he, like in this last year at Bromont, my stirrup fell off my saddle and I had too many time penalties, and that's why we don't have our qualifications yet. So, that was a little frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So frustrating. And then, so if we can get qualified this season, I'll, try to get him to Kentucky next year. And if I don't get the qualification this season, then, he doesn't need to do another 4-star in the spring. He just, hopefully, my dream of dreams, like, this is like the ultimate young rider horse. Like, I would love to see this horse go to young riders. He is he's honestly, that was probably what he was meant to do, is be a young rider horse, but unfortunately got stuck with me. So that would be amazing if I could find a kid to take him 2-star or 3-star even, and just get a bunch of experience and learn how to ride, forward and be okay not winning the flat.
Right.
he's got a lot to teach the some younger riders. And he's only 14, so
And speaking of this, you just mentioned this oopsie that happened at Bromont with your
Ugh.
stirrups. So when, this sport, it's so unpredictable and stuff like that just happens and there's nothing you can do about it, So
So
when something like that
frustrating.
happens and it like you said, it's so frustrating. How do you deal with something like that? And how do you like push past it?
Well, I have to say, every year that goes by, you get a little bit, tougher at
A little jaded.
letting things just kind of roll off.
Yeah.
It is easier. Um, I mean, man, every situation's so different, and every blow feels a little different. That was more frustration than anything, right? Like it was such a stupid thing. And it was just ridiculous. It was like a skit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I am not Mark Todd. There was no way I was going to get around that. There was just no way I just not going to get around a 4-star with one stirrup. I just can't do it. Just not going to happen. I was way too early in the course. So that was frustrating. I was mad at myself because I couldn't do it. I was mad at myself because I couldn't, get it back on fast enough. But you have to process them, and I think you have your initial reaction, whatever emotion you feel, anger usually for me, or frustration, and then you have to put yourself a little bit into perspective real fast, right? Like, it's like, all right, you can't change it. It is what it is. Now you have to kind of put it away and figure out how you're going to move forward. Because I mean, I think even at the lower levels, people are, we all experience the same problems, right? They're just different levels of competing,
Mhm.
and for me, I put a lot of weight on what I can do with this horse because it affects my career. And affects, it affects a little bit my credibility. If I can, the more I can get done with him before I have to retire him, the better resume I have. And when it's always my fault, I can't blame anyone but me. So, but at the same token, regardless of how old I am, it's like you have to make mistakes and learn, and you can't really avoid that part of this sport. It's going to come eventually.
Yeah.
So whether it's with him or the next one, or the next one, it's just gonna have to happen eventually, right? You can't know it all. And I actually had this conversation with one of my working students not that long ago. It's like, it's not like one day you're just going to wake up and you're going to be really good. Like, you got to really gonna struggle through it to get to the other side. And recognize, the little moments that you have made improvement and you are doing okay. And it is okay. Like, it is frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. And it just wasn't meant to be, and that's, at that point I was really on a timeline. Like, COVID really affected my timeline. I'm sure everyone feels this way.
Yeah.
That was like the peak of my horse. And it really affected his career and my career. And it was really hard to swallow, but you have to put it into perspective, like, it just is what it is. And there's not anything that you can do to change that moment. And now you have to kind of, okay, how can I prevent this from happening again? Well, one of it with me is to put my freaking lock on the stirrup bar so that the stirrup leather doesn't fall off of the back of the saddle if my horse has a bad jump. I mean, like,
I'm sure you
what?
check that every time you get on now.
Oh my God. And now, I won't ride in a saddle that doesn't have that little lock thing on it. I don't know what it's called, but I think a lot of the French saddles don't have that. I'm like, do you guys know what could happen? I mean, I think that's the point. I think it's a safety mechanism, but
Yeah.
so it is, you do have to let it roll off you, because if you don't, you carry around a lot of resentment and a lot of chips on the old shoulder. and then you're just a miserable person. So
Yeah.
you know, it's, you gotta let it roll off you a little bit. And then honestly, I've said this before in other interviews, and like, it really helps to have friends. It really helps to have a community that you can, you know, whether it's within where you work, or if you're not a professional, if you have, you know, just friends that are doing the same thing, or coach, or I don't know. You know, if I didn't have my friends who, like I said, most of my friends in this industry are more experienced than me. They sympathize 100% because they've been there and they know it sucks, but yep, that's the sport, right? Like, you gotta keep going. Like, we hear you, we're sorry that happened. I can't believe that happened. They're genuinely concerned, but like, it's gonna be fine. Like, you're gonna get through it, you know, keep going, and then, you know, it'll be fine, you know, and it is fine. It is totally fine. And, you know, if I never get to a 5-star with this horse, it doesn't mean I'm never going to get to a 5-star. It just, you know, it's just not what meant to happen. And that's okay. It sucks. Totally sucks. Doesn't mean it doesn't suck. But, you know, this horse, you know, skyrocketed my riding.
Right.
You know, so I got to remember that, and it is what it is. You know, if he can't do it, he can't do it.
Yeah.
And we might get there, and I might not be able to do it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you know, I'm like, actually, this is a terrible idea. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. He's awesome. It'll be fine. But, you know, there'll be more to come, hopefully. But yeah, you got to lean on other people sometimes. And that's also, it's one of those things, you can't really avoid that. If you're not leaning on someone else at some point in this sport, you're not going to be successful. I can say that with 100% certainty, you know.
Very important to have your people around you. I hear that from, I think pretty much every rider I talk to. It's very, very important.
And it makes you feel, you know, like you're not alone, you know, and this sport is so isolating sometimes, and the problems that you'd face with are so big sometimes, and, you know, emotional, sometimes, you know, dangerous, and sometimes sad, and sometimes, you know, whatever, financially terrible, whatever it is. They're, you know, everything that we do is like big. You know, the hits are big, good hits are big, the bad hits are big. And people aren't meant to do that on their own, you know?
Right. Yeah, definitely. And when you are at a big competition, do you have any kind of routine before you go in the ring? Maybe you check your stirrup bars now.
Stirrup bars, yes, I do check those before I get on. I always, and when I'm at a big competition, I always put on the horse's boots. Or if like someone has done it for me, I reset them. I'm very anal that way. I think it's probably because I was a groom. And it's just like, kind of like, as a groom, I had a lot of, you know, methodic. I was probably honestly way more anal about what my routine was when I was working for somebody else and for myself. But my tack is something that I have to check. I have to reset. I do it even when I'm not showing. I have to see it. I have to see it. I have to feel it. I have to adjust it, and I might adjust it right back, but it's kind of like a weird neurosis that I have. You know, I've never really had anything happen other than my stirrup obviously falling off. But just, you know, it's like kind of a mental check. But other than that, no, I don't really have, you know, I have socks that I wear, but I don't really have any crazy superstitions. I've calmed down a lot. I've calmed down a lot. I was a little bit more high strung when I was starting out, but I'm a little bit less that way now. Just kind of rechecking everything is something I have to do.
Do you ever get nerves before you go into the ring, and how do you handle them if you do?
I complain. Why am I doing this? I ask other people, like, is this ever going to stop? Why is this happening? Yeah, I 100% get nervous. I do not usually get nervous before dressage. I was nervous at Kentucky before dressage because it's a big stage. But I was also fun nerves, because it's not scary. Uh, yeah, I'm very nervous, yes. But at the same time, I feel, when I feel prepared, the nerves go quickly. So,
Right.
if I'm doing something that I know it might be a little bit like, ooh, maybe could have spent a little bit more time doing that, or I don't know, on any horse really, I'm like, is this really gonna go okay? I just have to like, okay, I need to focus on basics and whatever. But for the big shows, you usually are going into those feeling ready, at least as ready as you can, and you have to remind yourself that you're ready. I find a lot of comfort in being on a horse that I know really well.
Yeah.
That's something that gives me a lot of confidence. We've done a lot together, and I've learned a lot. I've learned how to ride him better. And I really felt like last year I really got a lot of, I tweaked some things that allowed me to ride better, like just lighter and softer, and it worked so well. And it really just brought me up that next kind of level of feel. And
Yeah.
that's something that, again, relationship of, this horse, 6 or 7 years, so the first horse show on a horse, I'm very nervous because you have no idea what they're going to do. So predictability helps, but, feeling prepared, really centers you. And I really focus on, when I'm feeling a little bit like butterflies or nerves or whatever, I just start moving, like I start trotting or cantering, or I just have to kind of, move. Once my body is moving, my brain usually focus. And once I'm, jumping or whatever, warming up, I'm usually okay. I'm usually okay. Even if I make a mistake or something, again, because I have somebody on the ground, a coach or friend, just for that feedback, right? Just that little feedback is important. And I feel like some people might not need that or want it in that moment. I definitely need that kind of bounce off, just to, even if I'm not even hearing what they're saying because I'm blacked out nervous, just knowing that there's somebody else here keeps me grounded to what's happening, and then I'm totally fine.
I've totally been there, that blacked out nervous.
Yep. Like, I don't know
nothing's
what you're
going
saying,
on around you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Totally
usually
get
also
that.
try to make jokes. I like to cut ice a little bit. Break the ice. Cut ice. That was weird.
Yeah.
Break the ice. With a bad joke. That's usually something that I do. But yeah, it's taken time to kind of figure it out. But a little self-reflection and making sure that I'm breathing and all the things that anybody needs to do when their adrenaline gets a little too high.
So I'd like to go into your training a little bit here. So you just got back this morning from a lesson with a student. So I wanted to ask if you have, or could you describe your teaching style?
That's a hard question. My teaching style. I like to think my teaching style is amazing. I don't know. I feel like my teaching style, I have a very kind of laid back, I think approachable personality. So I like people to feel comfortable when I'm teaching them. I try to bring good energy to my lessons because I want it to be fun. And I would say I'm pretty positive in my teaching style. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I've never really thought about what my teaching style is. What is my teaching style? I don't know. Give me an example of a teaching style. Give me an example of a teaching style.
I think you answered it great there. You mentioned it earlier with like, you said Will is, when you train with him, he's a little more structured, but Boyd, he's a little looser. And now you're saying yourself, you just like to bring a positivity to the lesson. So that's totally
Yeah,
how
I
you
say,
could answer that.
I want people to feel confident because people ride better when they feel confident. So I'm not the coach that you go to with your kid to see how big they're going to jump. That is not my style. I really like to build people up a little bit, so that they feel like, they understand what they're doing. Their horses understand. Maybe that's what I say with my teaching style would be. I really make sure people understand, or I try to at least, what their horses are thinking in the moment. Like, how is your horse going to be better in this situation? And start to kind of make that more of a priority. And I feel like, I'm very into people being the horse's understanding. When the horse understands, the horse will be more successful. When the horse is more successful, the rider will do less, right? And that's kind of, my teaching style. It's very, especially cross country. A lot of people, that come to me that I've never taught before, like, we do a lot of trotting, a lot of long rein, kind of just teaching them about their horse's balance. And I want people to feel like they understand why they're asking what they're asking and when they're asking, because I feel like, we teach how we learn, right? And as we've learned, as I've learned, I am a very feel-based rider. But there are things that really stick with me, and it all has to do with how the horses are operating, without the rider. And I really feel like it's important for people to prioritize their horses understanding their job. And so that's kind of my, I think, style.
Yeah, for sure.
And it makes
And that
people
actually
safer. I mean, it just makes everyone safer, like, I just feel like there's a lot of really, I'm not going to say bad, but just the priorities are wrong. The priorities are wrong. And that's when people make mistakes that are going to get them into trouble. And so I just want to feel like people have a little bit more of a knowledge of what they're doing, and their horses are doing it with less input from the rider, than there needs to be. And position, I try to work on people's position, because that obviously affects the way that we ride. And it's hard to fix that, even myself included. Like, I've been riding my whole life, and usually I have an okay position, but if I ride alone for a long time, I'll all of a sudden go to a lesson. I'm like, what am I doing? My friend Holly, my friend Holly came over and helped me jump last week, and Holly Payne, and I'm like, I feel like I can't put my heels down. Like, what is going on? She's like, it's actually, you're like hunched over like an old lady. I'm like, what? What is going on? Like, I haven't seen myself ride in a while. This is bad.
Yeah.
So, it's making people a little bit aware, self-aware.
Mm-hmm. And that rolls into my next question, and you touched on it a little bit about the horse. What would you say your training philosophy is for when you're riding and with your horses?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely similar, right? It's my number one priority always, sometimes maybe to a fault, is that my horses are enjoying their job. I really want them to be happy in what they're doing and want to do what I'm asking. Like, if I have to make a horse do something, I'm not a very happy person. It doesn't mean, I don't have to put some hard boundaries sometimes. And, when I know that I need to be a little bit tougher, I'll go ride with someone that is going to make me a little bit, okay, come on, like with my young horse, Artie, I know he's a little spooky, and, he's young and big and whatever. And I went and took a lesson with William Fox Pitt. And it wasn't like he was making me beat him or anything, but he was like, oh, okay, like, it's time to go now. I'm like, you're right. I know it's time. It is time. I wouldn't have come if it wasn't time. But I, sometimes need that little push. But I really want my horses to be very rideable, very broke, and be able to be relaxed doing their job. And sometimes that takes a lot of time. I was just having my friend Gus is a show jumper, and we were just talking about our young horses and stuff, and he thinks one's kind of suited to eventing. And I'm like, I'll take the horse and I'll train it, but I'm like, I'm not a catch rider. This is catch riding. I give people that can catch ride so much credit. But it is not a skill that, I mean, I would do it, but I wouldn't be happy doing it. I just can't. I can't do it. It's just, my head is like spinning the whole time. I love the training process. I love when the training process, shows, at the competitions. I love when, you have a horse that takes time to do something and then all of a sudden they do it. It's why I'm still doing this job, because every horse is so different and they're all so impressive. And I really love, I don't know, I love the way that they think, and I love trying to figure out the way that they're thinking and building that relationship. Because to me, when the horses are really rideable, I feel super confident. I can really, when the buttons are where I need them to be and how I want them to be, I can ride a lot better. I can ride a lot better, and I can get the results that I want. And I feel good about doing it, so that's kind of my training approach, is a little bit, maybe slower than some people, but I think it pays off in the end way more.
Yeah. Do you have an exercise that you really like to practice at home when you're riding that you think strengthens your horses and keeps them fit and happy?
Ooh, for nothing like specific comes to mind, other than I think what people skip a little bit, like once their horses are going, is just doing very basic transitional work. Just literally going between walk, trot, canter, trot, walk, canter, canter, trot, canter, walk, all of those transitions, and really focusing on being correct. It's easy to skip that part, and that's kind of where I am now when I'm working on more detail work. With Anakin, he's trained now, he gets very average scores on the flat, and the only way I'm going to get those scores better is in the details, right? Is in accuracy, it's in the transitions. So, working on just straightness and rhythm and being aware when I'm doing a downward transition that my horse is falling a little left or a little right, and teach them to carry themselves through those transitions. And it seems so basic and so easy, but it really is hard for them when you really start to think about it. And then you can start to add in a little bit of terrain in that, in the same token, and start to work a little uphills and downhills doing those transitional work, and you'll notice how much your horse's balance changes. But you want them to learn, how to find their feet a little bit on terrain, without you having to hold them together so much. So I would say that's something right now kind of current in my mind that I've kind of been like, oh, we've kind of not really paid attention to this in a while. So it's the priority it's the flavor of the week right now. And not doing one or two transitions. It's like doing like 20, 30, 40 transitions. And I think, especially teaching people, they get so mad and so frustrated when they have a bad transition. But I'm trying to teach people, okay, that wasn't good enough. You're right. No, it's not. No, just do it again, and then do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, without having a big reaction, right? You don't have to get after them if they make a mistake. You want them to keep trying, right? And then reward them when they try, and then they'll try harder, So, and so much of us, we just get so caught up in getting to the end goal that we forget about the little tiny things that actually make the end goal so much easier. I think that's kind of what I'm doing.
it's easy to forget actually how much strength and the horse needs to have proper transitions too.
Totally.
You know, when a horse is out of practice in transitions, it's not going to take 1 or 2 tries to get it correctly. You
No.
know, they need to have, you know, do it, like you said, 20, 30, 40 times and build up that strength, and then they become consistent.
Totally. And I've got a horse going to dressage regionals next week, and he's doing second level and first level, and second level is all canter walks, which is hard. So that's what I've been practicing. And then the other day I'm like, oh my God, I haven't done a canter trot transition on this horse in
Yeah.
weeks. And he like really, it took him a second to figure it out, because he's just been so, you know, we've been doing the same transitions, and I'm like, oh my God. And it's really important. They use completely different muscle groups, going from canter to walk to then canter to trot. So, you know, it's funny how stuck in a way that you can get in your riding. So it's really important to keep things a little fresh.
Yeah. Definitely. I'm doing that. I have I'm a hunter jumper, but you know, it applies through the disciplines, and I have a young one that I'm training right now, and kind of the same thing happened to me the other day. I did a clinic with someone, and his transitions just weren't coming out the way that you know, the way that I had been riding them for months, and then kind of forgot about it. And I was like, I think he needs a little bit of a reminder. Like, we got to get back on top of these.
I know. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I have just a couple more questions for you to wrap up. Okay. This one's a little bit of a difficult one, but what would you say is the hardest part of this sport for you? And it could be anything from emotionally to financially or physically. But what would you say?
I think emotionally I'm okay. I'm okay emotionally. It was a little rough start. And physically it is very demanding, but again, I like working. I like being physical. It's definitely, you know, right now, again, flavor of the week, financially this year has been really hard. And I'm pretty savvy, and I don't care about, you know, working to make up money that I'm missing or whatever. I love working, but this year is the first year that I felt like I'm just not making my ends meet, and that's frustrating to me, because I'm old. I'm like almost 40 years old, and I've been doing this a while, and I didn't see it coming. And oh God, it's so frustrating when you feel like your business is actually doing pretty well and you're doing okay, and it's just not enough. And then you have to spend so much energy and so much time trying to figure out how to make that money. And you like, some days I'm like, I actually can't ride my horses because I have to teach, or I have to go whatever, sell my soul. Maybe I'll start, you know, donating some stem cells. I don't know, but it's it sucks. And I literally I'm mad at myself, because last year, this is the reason this is happening. Last year, I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm finally making enough money. Like, I felt okay. Like, I wasn't panicking. I wasn't like running out of money every month. I could pay all the bills that I needed to pay. And I said that, and I think I took a break. I relaxed and took a breath. First mistake, you know, this is the nation of hustlers right here. So I relaxed, and it is a little bit disheartening sometimes when you feel like, okay, sometimes you're like, all right, I could be working a little harder, right? Okay. But when you feel like, man, I really am working as hard as I possibly can, something else has to change, because this business model is not sustaining. And that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. And that's really frustrating, because I do feel like I have, you know, I had it a little bit sorted, but yeah, it's not been a very good year money wise. I don't know if I'm the only one feeling that way, but I don't think so. I doubt that I am.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty. I think the financial part of the sport is difficult for a lot of people. Especially like you said, I don't think that you're the only one. I think that what's going on in the world right now, it's a little, financially can be very stressful at the moment.
It's very stressful, and it's like, and then you see, and I do not want to come across as like a boomer, but you see these kids, looking for working student jobs, and this generation, we all make fun of them, but you're probably part of it. I don't know how old you are, but they're really good about sticking up for themselves, which, generations prior are not. But there's a big argument right now. I don't know if this is the same in the hunters, but in eventing, the working student position is kind of a dying position. And, for very obvious reasons, right? Like the job is hard, you make no money. Not very many kids have the ability to kind of not make money for a year. And, not everyone is great to work for sure. But, and, people are there's this huge internet fight right now about that people aren't making enough money or paying what people are worth, and the workload is too much and all this stuff. 100% agree, but the industry is still the same. Like, if I tell my kids they only have to work 4 days a week or 5 days a week, and they only have to work 8 hours a day, and I'm going to pay them top dollar, well, I'm going to have to hire like 3 other people, and I'm going to have to quadruple my rates, because the horses are still horses, right?
Yeah.
So they still need the same amount of care. Someone has to do that care. And it's just an unrealistic, at least right now in my brain. I don't know what the answer is. I know I would pay my kids all of the money I had. I am paying them all of the money that I have, actually. Because, as the professionals, at least in eventing, again, I don't know how the other sports work in the barns, but we're not making any money either. So it's not like we're hoarding all of the money and not giving it away. It's like there is no money to give around. Because the business model doesn't really work from a purely business standpoint. And I have conversations with myself while I'm driving. Okay, Megan, emotional creature, right? We do this sport because we have emotional attachment to these horses, right? This is an emotional career. But if I were to really take my emotion completely out of the equation, which is almost impossible for me to do, what would I do right now with my business? And the answer is really shocking, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, that's a terrible idea. I'm never doing that, So I think that's why we all struggle so much, is because we do not make business decisions 100%, right? Some of us are definitely better at it than others. But there is always some emotional component that then, in real life, okay, no businessman or woman would ever make that decision for the business. Like, the business needs a completely other direction.
Right.
My dad called me the other day. My dad's 70 years old. I'm 38 years old. And well, he's almost 70. Sorry, Dad. And he's like, so what's your plan?
Like, don't you love that question?
What? I was dying. I actually cried first because I was like, are you serious? But yeah, he was serious. Like, what is your plan? Why are you doing this still? Like, he doesn't want me to quit. He doesn't know why I still want to ride. He's like, wouldn't you be so much better? Yeah. He's like, you would make so much more money if you just was a coach. And I was like, 100% agree. But the whole point of me coaching is so that I can ride. Also, people like to ride with coaches that are still competing.
Yeah.
Like, it keeps me more relevant to the sport. So it was pretty funny. I was like, what is my plan? What?
Don't ask me that question.
Don't ask me. We don't have a plan, Dad. It's the same. But you do have to at some point be like, okay, something has to give, and I'm kind of at the point where I think I'm getting ready to enter in kind of a transition with Anakin kind of stepping down. I'm going to sell my middle horse is going into dressage land. And then I've got, one baby that I'm on the fence about keeping or selling, purely financial reasons. Like I love her. I want to keep her. So I think I've got to kind of shift, get some horses off the books, and then maybe come in, into the spring with a little bit of a more, solid budget, maybe. Yeah. I don't know what people really do.
That plan, as your dad speaks of.
Yeah, the plan.
So, just last question. What is next for you? What's on your radar? I know you said Kentucky in the spring. Do you have anything between then and now?
Yes. So, like I said, if Anakin's still okay, he's headed to Morven Park. I'm going to do the 3-star there, just as a fitness run to make sure he's still feeling good. And he'll go to Terra Nova 4-star in November. And then my second horse, Artie, who's switching careers into dressage land, he heads to the regional championships next week in Virginia at the Virginia Horse Center, which is going to be hilarious because fish out of water. I can't wait. I ride on the flat with Lauren Chumley, and I told her I was going to show up to my first level championship in my tails and my long coat. And oh man, it's going to be funny. My goal of next week is to not get yellow carded for being an event rider. And then I've got a bunch of students doing a lot of local stuff in the next few weeks. I've got some clinics on the calendar. I was really hoping I could make it down to Fair Hill, but I actually think I have to work that weekend now. Again, okay. Emotional versus...
Yeah.
So I might go down for dressage. So that's kind of the spring. We've got a show, I think, almost every single weekend until the end of the calendar, which is like the middle of November. And we go to Florida in that time. So between November 1st and 10th, we'll be going down to Ocala, and then we'll have a little break, and then the real craziness begins. So, my hope is that I can sell my dressage horse and save a little bit of money this winter and go get something a little bit further along in the spring. Because I have kind of a little bit of a gap between Anakin and a 5-year-old who hasn't competed yet. So I need to fill in the gaps a little bit. But, it's
awesome.
all fun. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time again to speak with me. This has been a wonderful conversation. It's been great to get to know you better.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode with Megan Kepferle, and a big thank you to the sponsor of this week's episode, Boehringer Ingelheim. Learn more at boehringer-ingelheim.com. You can subscribe to the Practical Horseman podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Also, tune into our mini-sode series, The FOD Pod, where you'll hear audio lessons from our favorite Practical Horseman on-demand clips. At Practical Horseman On Demand, you can enjoy hundreds of how-to videos and get insider access to exclusive interviews and lectures, slow-motion demonstrations, and step-by-step tutorials taught by top-level pros in the hunter, jumper, equitation, and eventing disciplines. When you tune into the FOD Pod, listen closely for a promo code for 15% off your Practical Horseman On-Demand subscription. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode. I'm Julia Boughtonhouse, and you've been listening to the Practical Horseman podcast.